really gotta love what you do, like on a daily, and not just the reputation, not your business card, not your salary, but really, the sort of intrinsic side of that profession. I always ask people, if you were to go to that, proverbial lonely island, would you take your profession with you?
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast series. Whether you're at school, sixth form, university, thinking about a career in law, or exploring law careers, you're in the right place. We are the one-stop shop for student lawyers. If you'd like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentlawyer.com. This episode is sponsored by the University of Law. The University of Law offers a range of undergraduate and postgraduate courses and master's degrees alongside an award-winning pro bono clinic, so you can build up your legal experience while studying. And their experienced career service will enable you to put your best foot forward when launching your legal career. The courses are employment focused and based on real legal practice, so you'll be better prepared for the workplace. Part-time and online study options are available so you can work and study at the same time. Click the link in the description box of the podcast to find out more about the courses on offer. Hello everyone, welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast. My name is Stephanie. I'm a final year law student, future trainee solicitor, and the host of today's episode. Joining me today is Mario Wälti, corporate and M&A attorney who is from and works in Switzerland. In addition to being a highly experienced attorney, Mario is also a very successful hip-hop artist. And during the episode, we talk about his career journey, the biggest and most interesting mergers that he has worked on, and how his career as an attorney and music artist complement one another. Mario, welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast. It's just wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
The pleasure, honestly, is all ours. And I just want to thank you for spending your morning with us. I know that you are super busy at the moment doing lots of M&A transactions, and we're going to hear more about that a little bit later on in the show. But why don't we kick off I'm going to kick off the show by asking you to introduce yourself and your career journey to date.
All right. Happy to do that. So as people could probably tell from my accent, I'm not exactly, UK born and raised. My name is Mario. I was born way too long ago in a beautiful country called Switzerland, which is also where I went to school and went to at least part of my, time that I spent at university. I did, funny enough, spend some time at a UK university also. But I basically passed both my university degrees and also the bar exam later here in Switzerland. I stayed at university for quite a while because in between my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, which is what you both need in order to qualify as a lawyer or an actual attorney in Switzerland, I did a PhD, which allowed me to spend more time at this beautiful sort of, paradise-like place called university where life doesn't, yet fully kick in. And then I basically picked up work with, a firm that's called Hamburger. It's basically your, top five, big law equivalent in Switzerland. Although there's probably only about 4 of them here and they're smaller in size. And usually they're not, part of some sort of international actual network. They got, best friends, law firms in other countries. But other than that, they're really on their own. And that's basically what I did from 2012 till 2020. And then I basically, left the law firm and went, into what you would call the industry. I work in the energy sector now. But essentially, I'm doing the exact same thing. I always did corporate. I always did M&A. I did restructuring. So it's really sort of your cliche of, a business lawyer that I'm eagerly trying to fulfill every day.
Do you know what? Your career journey is just, it sounds so fulfilling. You've done such a lot, studied in different places, of the world, you must have so much life experience like behind your belt. And when you're talking about the best friends, it's really nice to hear that coming from an actual legal profession, because I'm sure I can speak for other student lawyers, but when I was going through the process of doing practice case studies in advance of my training contract interview, a lot of them would throw out like, oh, the client is in Switzerland or places where the law firm doesn't have jurisdiction. And these terms would come about. But yeah, I've never actually heard it in context but by a legal profession. So it's really nice to hear these things in real life. You went to school when you mentioned that you studied in the UK for a little bit, and I must admit I did some research like on your background and checked out on LinkedIn, and you went to Southampton, didn't you?
That is correct. Yeah, for one single reason though.
Go on, tell me.
Well, that was still, that was before, obviously, way before Brexit and all of these things. And it was part of an Erasmus program. Which is basically, I don't know if you're still familiar with that program, but it was basically some sort of exchange between European universities where you'd still pay your sort of fee back home, but you were allowed to attend classes at, a couple of universities, on a list. And I wanted to go to the UK. And I think I don't really remember the list, but I think it was Southampton, it was Durham, and something else. And Southampton, that was just before Southampton got, I think, relegated for the last time. So they still had a Premiership team. And, football is life. So I had to go to Southampton. Yeah.
Excellent.
For lack of alternatives, right?
Yeah.
I had to go there. Yeah.
I don't go to Southampton, but my sister had a friend that did. And I went there a couple of weekends to go out in the evening. And yeah, I'm sure it has a good football team and good nightlife as well. So yeah, highly recommend Southampton University. Woo, woo.
Well, yeah, I can definitely say I enjoyed my time.
So you mentioned that you work predominantly in energy as well. What's that like?
Well,
is it really risen recently?
Well, I think whether it's risen is probably more like a question of the actual business case, right? I mean, economically speaking, definitely it's sort of on everyone's radar these days.
Yeah.
But work-wise, for me, there's not a real difference, I think, between now and maybe a year ago, because mainly, the decisions that my company takes and that I'm sort of executing on, they're driven by calls which are not made by me. So like, as an example, I had by far the more intense M&A year last year, before maybe, the conflict in the Ukraine kicked off, etc. And before energy, became yet again that big of a subject. So M&A wise, last year was way more intense than this year, which could also come with the fact that, prices for these decent targets may have risen a lot in the last, 11 months. And it may be outside of, what the people in my company, the powers that be, are willing to pay these days, because they feel like these are not the greatest opportunities or whatever. But, the economic, like sort of global situation, you rarely ever, that's my experience anyway, you rarely ever really feel that in a law firm in the way that work ever stops.
Yeah.
It's a different type of work, right?
Sure.
In economic downturns, you may have different transactional setups or different, transactional scenarios than in upturns. But per usual, as long as your firm is, in a position where there's actual work to be done, there's always going to be enough work for people.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, thank you for explaining that. So why did you choose to pursue a career in law, and more specifically corporate and M&A?
It's a great question, because I think, the French would probably say it was a faute de mieux type of career. I think I looked at a couple of options, and I always did and still do have things which I'm trying to pursue in, that, residual spare time that I get. And it just made a lot of sense because in law, I could probably combine most of these things most ideally. Obviously, this is hypothetical because I never, pursued another career, so I can't really tell. But that was sort of our assessment back in the day. I still, when I joined university, I think I still, I don't know, practice football like 4 or 5 times a week. And that really, I could still pursue that. Then, some of the other things that I engage in, they just sort of still were, managed to remain on that radar while doing, everything that was required for university. So I was not, if you want to put it that way, I was not that kind of kid that at 12 years of age would tell his or her parents, I'm going to become a lawyer. And that was sort of, nailed down. And I just basically, followed through on that. But it was something that I got into almost step by step. At university, I just figured, obviously I attended all these classes because, I was trying to be a, decent young human being. And business law just struck me as interesting. But I think it could have also, I don't know, it could have also been criminal law. That struck me as interesting also. It's really just, at some point that you kind of go what you got and then you never really look back.
Yeah, that's interesting. You do hear a lot of these stories where people just kind of knew it was for them, started watching. I've heard a couple of times actually, people who have gone into law have been inspired after watching, what are they called? Like drama. Yeah, Suits, exactly. But perhaps Ally McBeal if they're a little bit older or something like that.
Yeah.
Highly rate Ally McBeal.
They always cut out the dull and boring hours at the library, though.
I know. I do love that Meghan Markle used to strut around though in Louboutins and everything like that. So that is the glamorous side, which I do hope exists. But yeah, I think that a lot of people have quite an unconventional journey into law, especially these days, that law firms are perhaps more open to people who have got other interests and not perhaps, I don't want to say narrow-minded because that's not what I mean, but have different experiences and then able to talk to clients about, what they're interested in and about, their business, because I think that's all part of, being the commercially aware lawyer that places are looking for. So, yeah, I do always, I do always try and stress that, it's okay to go out and play football 5 times a week if you want to, because it's a great energy buster. And when you're out meeting people, chatting to people, I just think you become a more well-rounded person. So yeah, I love the unconventional way into law. So perhaps you could tell us about one of your most memorable deals that you've worked on and how you were involved in the matter.
Well, okay. Let me try. I mean, the biggest in the sense of, most notorious deal that I probably worked on was the merger of 2 companies. One is called Holcim, which is like the biggest cement and concrete producer in the world, and Lafarge, which back in that day was the same thing, a French company, and they were like the second biggest. So it was like a worldwide, like literal merger of 2 companies, which obvious, and both of them listed, one in Paris, one in Zurich. And obviously that was a, deal which, be it only for its dimensions, sort of struck me, flabbergasted me just when I got put on it, like just by the sheer fact that at some point in my life, I got to work on, that type of deal, or a deal of that type or that size. But I think, materially, in a sense that content wise, I think it's really hard to say these days what I did because I did a lot of things. I mean, at the end of the day, it was 2 regulated companies and their, combination agreement was very standard because they're both listed. So there's not really too much, of an angle by one towards the other or vice versa, because the information was out there. It was really the fact that they were going to merge that was probably, the secret that was at that time, best be kept as close to, the few people in the know as possible. But other than that, from a deal perspective, and, there was some securities laws were involved because, as said, there were two listed companies, one in a foreign, from a Swiss perspective, foreign jurisdiction. So there was a lot of, almost regulatory stuff that was involved. But I think deal-wise or materially speaking, I probably worked on smaller, less known or less prominent deals that were more exciting from a work perspective. And I think that's also why I chose this one. I mean, this is one, if you Google that, I think it was in 2014, that made headlines worldwide. It was one of the biggest deals at that time. But content-wise, work-wise, I probably, bought, a university, like a university spin-off startup in the name of Intel or whoever, which, they maybe paid 1.5 million as opposed to what, the total volume was in that merger deal. And it was work-wise probably more interesting.
Yeah.
So all of this goes to say, name dropping is one side of the coin, but the actual work on it is the other.
I'd like to take a moment to speak about the University of Law, which is the university I decided to study my LPC at. The University of Law is the sponsor of this podcast and makes it possible for us to continue bringing these episodes to you. So we really appreciate you supporting us by supporting our sponsors. What really sets the University of Law apart from other universities is its belief in training students for the real world from the moment they accept a place. The University of Law's experienced career service and award-winning pro bono clinics offer students the chance to get real-life legal experience which can boost employability. They offer a range of undergraduate and postgraduate legal training and master's degrees designed by qualified experts to help students excel at any stage of their career. Their courses are employment-focused, honing key skills in a teaching environment based on real legal practice. Part-time and online study options are also available on many of their courses to help students work and study at the same time. If you'd like to find out more about the courses on offer, please click the link in the description box of the podcast.
So what kind of things do you really find interesting when you're working on a case? Like what is one of your favorite things to do?
I think
do you like trawl through, I don't know if this is quite a junior thing to do, but is it like looking through the what do they call it, data room and stuff like that, and finding and different documents? Like, is that kind of like reviewing documents like that something that you enjoy doing?
I personally never enjoyed that. Never did.
I've never met anybody that has.
Yeah, but I could tell you, and I know it sounds sort of old, but I could tell you, people who pursue that type of career, it's adamant that they do spend some time doing that. Not because, you gotta, work your ropes or whatever. It's not some old school, career type of step, but it really helps you to understand what the actual questions are, which are being raised by clients. And I think that it's probably, that is probably one of the most basic lessons to take away from all of, the stories that, people who've done that for a couple of times could tell you. There's a lot of work that, these days almost gets automated. Like, I don't mean in a digital way, but like, a lot of first year lawyers, they would, work their way through data rooms, etc. And they fill in some spreadsheet and whatnot, but they usually don't really know what they're doing. And I think the purpose behind all of this is, what the company you may want to buy or the company you want to sell, what the contents of that company are, what the state that company is in is like. So basically you get to know your target or your new toy or whatever you want to call it, but it really does, pursue a purpose. I personally never liked that because, as a lot of people probably do, I felt like this is really grunt work and I want to sort of, be I don't know, the last person in line, sort of working on the finishing touches, but it just takes a while to get there. I think personally what I like, and these days, honestly, it's not even, the legal matters per se that I like. I like strategy. How do you approach negotiations? How do you go into those? Where's your weaknesses? Where your strengths is? On one hand, and on the other hand, I really like connecting people. Like I could probably not, be as happy with my career if I were a litigator, because it's more of a divergent type of, legal practice. Like you fight. Honestly, in my work, I don't really want to fight. Like I want to fight for my point, but getting two parties to where they actually feel like this is mutually beneficial and they sign off on it, and maybe there's some champagne involved. That's probably more my side of things.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that you've been involved in restructuring cases as well. So yeah. What kind of work is involved in restructuring? Because I'm presuming there's not so much of a looking for a database room, because it's different kind of work.
Well, it could involve that. I mean, a lot of, in very abstract terms, a lot of, company groups, they at some point choose, some sort of setup or structure, and that may 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, not still be the right structure. So basically it's corporate and M&A work, but more of an internal nature. You just restructure the actual company group. And that also comes into play in situations of financial distress. When you need to let go of certain assets, you need to shut down certain businesses, etc. That's all what you would sort of call restructuring work. And right. Yes, it involves other stuff, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to, corporate and transactional work, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that as well. So what is it like to live and work in Switzerland as an attorney? And what's your work-life balance like?
I mean, life and work as an attorney in Switzerland, I could probably cut out, the as an attorney part. A lot of people in Switzerland will tell you that it may not be the most exciting place on planet Earth to live in. Although nature is amazing. So, whenever you can, I don't know, if you like hikes, this is the best place to be at. And then obviously, this sounds dull, but from a sort of political, economic point of view, obviously there's few places where, I don't know, your safety at 2 a.m. in the morning in the city is as guaranteed, where, your salary is somewhat guaranteed, where, I don't know, your retirement benefits, etc. All of that is probably really perfect, which also makes for an economic setup, which still to this day, I think thrives. So, we must do something right. But life as an attorney, and as an attorney now, like really with a focus to that profession, always comes with, I think, an awful work-life balance.
Yeah. So how do you handle that? Do you try and integrate the both of them? So how does it work? Do you still
honestly, I think there's probably two ways to go at this. A lot of people that I know, they really do nothing but work, and they sort of manage to indulge in work so much that, they don't really need anything else. I always personally find that hard to believe, but there may be people who really could turn this profession also into their hobby. And there's other people that just kind of go at it round the clock, right? You just you have to get used to, I don't know, making dinner plans for 9:30 instead of 7:30. And it's not like every day, but it's just something, if you want to manage to, at the same time, besides your profession, enjoy, you just got to make time for it, I think. And obviously, time becomes somewhat scarce anyway. Once you get older, once you work, especially in professions, with legal people, it's a consequence of the system. We technically bill hours. So the more hours we work, the more hours we bill.
Yeah.
So there's, economic incentive, for law firms to, in having their people work long hours, which I think personally is not the best thing. It'd be great if at some point, law firms manage to actually, put price tags on products rather than hours. But I think there's still some way to go over there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So can you please talk to us about your endeavors as a hip hop artist?
Well, not my endeavors. I mean, it's something that I've always, and it probably played into that decision back in the day of, pursuing a career in law also. It's just something that I did for years. I mean, I don't know, don't ask me how, some middle-class white kid from Switzerland ever got in touch with that type of culture, but that was like 30 years ago or so. And I've always been like an avid fan, and then worked in hip hop as a journalist for a US-based magazine for quite a while. And then at some point, really, I just figured, there's people that do that in this sort of, odd, weird language that is Swiss German. So why not, try that yourself? And, same thing. I never looked back. It's just, from a professional perspective, it's probably also some sort of hobby. Only with me, at least at some points, it reached a certain size. So that career became, I don't know, half prominent, or like that made a couple headlines, which then automatically plays into your professional life because, people read papers.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're going to ask me whether I profited from that. I have, but also it's been a disadvantage. It's probably both. I mean, for me, obviously presentations, or I don't know, oral expression in general is something that I do in both. I know how to, or I think I know how to, handle stages in both worlds, which is obviously helpful. And I think I can be quite poignant in the sense that, I really emotionally try and get my point across, hopefully manage to do that, which could also be a disadvantage as a lawyer because you're sort of an advisor. You fight for what your client wants. You don't persuade and convince your clients all the time. It's sort of a mixed bag, I think. But, and as said, at some point, this shows up in like, your next employer's HR's research. And obviously it's kind of people's call whether they like that in general, because as you said before, it's 2022, they maybe want to have, a more diverse set of employees than, I don't know, 20 years ago. Or if they don't like that because, I don't know, something you do that gets you and that automatically comes with a certain level of exposure, which may not be to everyone's liking, because generally and outside of, the TV shows that you mentioned, lawyers tend to be quite, discreet.
I think it really depends on, I suppose, the type of clients that you work for, which, sectors you operate in. From what I've seen from law firms in the UK anyway, they do encourage people with other interests. But yeah, you are right. Like, I'm sure that it has profited you in many ways in terms of, presentation and understand and knowing how to use words to get your point across. And you talked about giving your input in, lawyers are advisors and meant to advise their clients on what they want to do. But surely they, as, a lawyer, a trusted advisor, and, knowing the law and being commercially aware, we do have some kind of responsibility to perhaps give a little bit of input in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably not really about, or like the point I was trying to make is not really about, obviously we got to guide them. It's part of our job. I think that the sheer fact that, this is something that, shows up or that people or your clients know about you has a certain impact on how they view you. Because it's funny, I always felt like to this day, I never understood how people could, differentiate that heavily between, say, and again, I'm just using technical terms, between a somewhat artsy, spare time activity and I don't know, you name it, golf, tennis.
Yeah.
Because it's just people that spend time doing something, be that, activity A or activity B. But I can definitely tell that, music, I mean, funny enough, as said, I played football on a decently high level, but it never raised any eyebrows. It was just, he's engaged in sports, whatever. But music always raised eyebrows. More often than not, it was positive, but it always was a sort of, item or like a subject that I would talk to people about or have to talk to people about.
Yeah,
Right?
can't explain. Sure,
Yeah.
I understand. So I've spoken to other successful entrepreneurs in the past who have studied law. So they've made the switch from law to another career. And they've said, although they never qualified as a lawyer, just by doing the LLB at university, they said that they were really able to understand that, words mean so many different things to so many different people. They were able to be very concise, and they were able to write like a really good email and understand contracts when they were presented to them in the workplace. So I just wondered if your career in law really added to your success as an artist when it comes to, I suppose, the business side of things.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it has. It definitely has. Funny enough, when I did like a third university leg in the US. And since that was sort of late, I also, had the liberty or took the liberty to engage in subjects which were directly entertainment related. So like, even though, my regular career is in M&A, etc., I studied, music industry law, entertainment law, all of these things. So in that way, I definitely profited from, my profession, although it was university, but still it's obviously linked to that profession. And besides that, I think there's a lot that comes with, for lack of a better term, I think it's not even a legal thing, but it's corporate education. As you just said, I just don't go about projects in a random way. Like I have an almost automatic, way to put stuff in bullets, in pros and cons lists, in enumerations, in just like in presentable format and manner. And I think that really helps in, sort of tying things together. So be it only for that, yes, it helped.
Excellent. That's really good to know.
Other than that, I don't know. I don't usually, write lyrics about tort law, but yeah.
There's still time.
Yeah. Maybe I don't know.
Maybe you can record. Maybe when the Student Lawyer podcast gets a revamp, you could perhaps do our intro music.
Exactly. I could do that. Try and do that.
So what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
Just with a view to law or generally?
Let's go with general.
Okay. I think, but that's what all people, at a certain age will tell you. I think, looking back, and I don't have, any regrets. I think I would still tell myself to go with my gut more often. And I understand it's a very, general sort of Instagram motivational quote type of thing to say, but I think that's really, really important, because I think when I found out, and I was lucky enough, I told you how I sort of got into law step by step, not as, a once and initial decision and I just stuck by it, but like I fell into the subject and then sort of fell in love with it, step by step. And I was lucky enough that sort of played out the way it did. And, the initial kind of action pan out in the sense that I'm still there and I'm still doing that and I still like doing that. But I think a lot of people don't have the luxury of things sort of falling into place. The legal profession, and that's just my view, is something you really, really ought to like a lot, like to a high degree, in order for you to be happy in it and to be able to, exercise it and, work in it for, the coming 30, 35 years or whatever it is, right? There's just no, and I can see that with my old firm, like even, partners, distinct partners, they still get into that sort of, today is actually a good example. It's like, November 3rd, it's, Thursday, it's grayish outside, definitely autumn. It's not exactly a motivating day. And these people, no matter how old and how successful they are, they still got to find the energy to walk into their offices at 8 or 8:30, and they, have to review some sort of contract draft that some junior lawyer did, even though they did that for the last 25 years. So you really gotta, love what you do, like on a daily, and not just a reputation, not your business card, not your salary, but really, the sort of intrinsic side of that profession. I always ask people, if you were to go to that, proverbial lonely island, would you take your profession with you? And ideally, I know, I understand this is utopic, but like ideally, yes, because this profession doesn't stop. There's a lot of work hours involved. Your family is going to suffer, definitely, because other people spend more time with friends and family and their loved ones. It's absolutely clear. So you really ought to love what you do in order for you to actually be and remain happy in that profession. Which was a very, very long answer to a just follow your gut type of short version.
Actually, it was not too long, and everything that you've just said really hit home. And you do hear about people going into the career and chasing these things that they think they should be liking, but I don't think that's sustainable. And I think that the way that you explained it and how to go out there and really get a fulfilling career, you just summarized it perfectly. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking to us about your career journey and your career and your career as a hip hop artist as well, because it's very interesting. And I'm going to put links to videos where people can check you out in the show notes.
Don't take videos to like 10 years old. Just, use a Spotify link or whatever.
Okay, I'll do that.
Couple international streams wouldn't hurt, I think.
Excellent. Are you excited for the World Cup? This it's starting this month, isn't it?
Yeah, it's starting in like 3 weeks. Yes, look, how I hope I'm an empathetic person, and obviously Qatar and everything that comes with Qatar is far from being the place where I would want a World Cup to take place at.
Yeah,
no question about that. Yeah. I have to be honest, I'm just too much of a fan of the sport. Like there's, I'd be lying to you and everyone else if I told you I'm boycotting this thing. Boycotting this thing just means I'm not going there. It means I watch the games on television. Yeah. But there's absolutely no way. I know it's just, and it only takes place every 4 years. So,
Yeah.
It's probably the wrong attitude to be having. But then again, I think that ship, not with me, but with the event as such, has sailed a couple of years ago. Let's just hope the next one is in a better place.
I agree. Anyway, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for everybody for tuning into another episode of The Student Lawyer. And we will see you back again here next time. To hear more of the Student Lawyers podcast, hit the subscribe button and leave us a star rating and review. If you would like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentlawyer.com.